All right, let's get started. So today we are going to talk about Azure Backup Solution. So I would say we will start talking about business continuity and disaster recovery solutions for your Azure virtual machines. The virtual machines which are running on the Azure environment. Okay. So first of all, before we understand that, let us understand what are the different situations where you see a disaster or where you require a business continuity solution, right? Then we will learn which tool can help us to fulfill our requirement and how to configure the tool and how to utilize the tool in case if the tool is not working as expected, and how to troubleshoot. And out of all this entire topic, what you will be doing as a Azure administrator. Okay, first we talk about the use case, then solution and configuring the solution, implementing the solution, supporting the solution, and understanding your roles on this solution. Okay, so let us assume that you have a Azure infrastructure. So I'm not going to draw anything. I'm going to just type the details here. So you have a infrastructure, the infrastructure on Azure. Let's say you have three subscriptions or three Azure subscriptions, and each Azure subscription you are hosting VMs in a different location. Let us say East US location and West US location, and you might have the solutions in the West Europe and in the Central India as well. Okay, these are the location you have your infrastructure hosted. Okay, so in the East West location, let's say you have around 50 resource groups, and in the West US you have around, let's say, 30 resource groups, all right, and so on. Okay, here you have, let's say, in the East US location you have around, let's say, 10 virtual networks, and in the other location you have around, let's say, 5 virtual networks. And here in the East US location, you have around, let's say, 2,500 machines. So which is the combination of Windows operating system, Linux operating system, which has SQL databases and a couple of critical applications, um, right? So this is the count, servers that you see. And same thing with the other location as well. Let's say here around 3,000 machines. Okay. So likewise, overall, in out of all three subscriptions, let's say you have around 8,000 virtual machines running on your in your Azure environment. Okay, so what we are actually going to talk about is the first thing is a business continuity solution. Okay, business continuity solution. So what happens is, okay, one of the Azure engineer credentials are compromised. Example, I'm just taking an example. And what they have done is the person who logged into the cloud subscription, they might have deleted um, 10 virtual machines. I'm just taking a simple example. Okay, 10 virtual machines. And by the time, you realize there is something has happened, you unblock that user. Now the 10 servers are not exist. Okay, this is one of the scenario. The other scenario could be, one of the, let's say around 5 servers in your Azure environment, right, are compromised with the ransomware attack. So those 5 servers are not accessible, which means your applications are not accessible. It's a business downtime. More than that, it's there's no data exist, right? So other scenarios, let's say one of the Azure administrator, or, cloud engineer, so accidentally deleted, okay, accidentally deleted the server. Let's say one server example, that's a critical server. Maybe it's a database. If the database is not working, even though the application front end and everything is working, it's not helping us, right? This is the one of the disaster, right? So your data is not accessible, right? Probably your DevOps team, performing some automation, and while they're performing the automation, couple of changes actually deleted a server or probably deleted an entire resource group, right? All the machines in the resource group is deleted. So there could be other scenarios. Okay, your application team performing some application upgrades. So after the application upgrade, the libraries are corrupted, operating system .NET related components are corrupted. The virtual machine is coming online. It is a production server, right? That's again a disaster situation, right? And maybe you do monthly patching, right? Monthly you do a patching for your servers, to ensure that your servers are updated with security and critical patches. You go with the patching solution, and during the monthly patching, the server is not coming online. So in these situations, there could be various other use cases, right? Okay. So in case of if your original VM is not exist, if you want to recover that machine, you need a solution. So that is the reason there are plenty of tools that are introduced to back up the data to another medium, storage medium, and recover it when there is a need, right? That is the reason backup tools are being introduced. Okay, so the backup tools have a specialization or specific. One second, one second, guys. So the backup tools have, the workflow or the features defined, like they knows how to take the backup of your data and what sequence it has to take the backup, and it has the capabilities to identify the changes that are happened. There's a full backup, differential backups, and there's a log backup, right? There's an incremental backup. There are different techniques that backup tools follow to back up your data, your production data. The tools can be so a couple of tools like third-party tools. Commvault, you have a backup solution, Commvault Backup, Veritas Backup. So there are different third-party backup tools already exist, and you can also implement those backup tools in the cloud environment, right? So this Commvault Backup tool, if I take an example, right? So this is an application. The application has to be running in a server. Okay, and this server, there are two servers. Probably you need one actually manage the backup jobs, and the other one actually take the backup of the server. And you also need a storage medium where the data will be stored, right? So this needs a set of infrastructure, to implement the backup solution. Okay, you need again an infrastructure. Okay, and this infrastructure again should have a high availability solution. So that is the reason Microsoft introduced, that is the reason what we always choose is go for the Azure native services, which is the Azure Backup Solution. So Azure Backup Solution is a service that Microsoft is offering. You don't need to set up any infrastructure to implement this backup solution, right? So if I need to implement the Commvault solution, I need to create a server, install the Commvault application, and introduce the storage solution, and I have to maintain the storage is secure and storage data is secure. And there could be some performance issues on your Commvault server, maybe data copy between the Commvault server to the storage service. There could be various other issues might occur. In case if the Commvault server is not online because of any issue, your backup may not work. It's not only one server, right? There could be, hundreds and thousands of servers backups is going to happening, right? If the, server which actually triggers the backups is not working, means, the solution, the entire backup solution may not work, right? So that's why we go with the Azure native service, which is Azure Backup Solution, right? With the Azure Backup Solution, you don't need to create any server. You don't need to create any application, install any application manually. So Microsoft has a service, we call it as a recovery services vault, and we are going to refer it as a RSV. So RSV has two solutions. One is the backup solution. The other one is a disaster recovery solution. So with the backup solution, you see the reasons why we have to introduce a backup solution. And if you want to introduce this backup solution, you just need to create a recovery service vault, and you can add your production servers to the backup. Okay, you can add your 2500 servers, which I mentioned, right? So this 2500 servers to the backup solution, and it can back up all data of all these 2500 servers with a specific schedule. So you will be able to define the schedule, when to trigger the backup, okay, and the data which is being backed up, how long it has to retain in the cloud environment, and the data where it is storing, right? The data where it is storing in the cloud. If it is a Commvault solution, you're going to use Azure storage solution, right? So in the backend, there is a storage medium that is being managed by Microsoft. So there you don't need to worry. So how long the data has to be stored in the storage, and what kind of storage type it is, LRS or GRS, like, the data durability. You can define those things, and based on these values, the backup job will be triggered and data backup will complete, and the data will be retained, you know based on the time frame that you're specifying in the backup policy. Okay, it's a very simple and straightforward. There's no human intervention required to trigger the backup. It's an automatic backup policy. Automatically the backup job will be triggered and backup job will be completed, and it might fail. Even if it is failed, you have a visibility in the Azure portal, recovery service world. You can go to the jobs and check which backup job is failed. So so that's the beauty of this service. You're not going to create any server. Just add your machines to the backup console, and it will trigger the backup, and later the copy operation, right, to the backend storage also will be taken care by Microsoft. On your virtual machine, it just takes approximately 5 to 10 minutes or 10 to 15 minutes of time to take the snapshot of your VM disk, and remaining part, copying the data to the Azure backend storage account, will be taken care by Microsoft. In case if there are any issues while copying the data to the Azure backend storage account, so Microsoft is going to be responsible for it. They'll be able to fix the problems in case if there is anything, right? So the only issue that you see is when backup is trying to take the snapshot of your virtual machine disk. In case if that is failed, then that is where you are going to start looking into it. Okay, so that's a problem statement, and the solution is Azure Backup Solution. And why we have to go for Azure Backup Solution, not the other third-party solutions, is the reason because you have to maintain the infrastructure with them. And the solution, how you configure, is what we are going to implement in our labs. Okay, and the issues also we will be discussing in our labs. Okay, so far whatever I spoke about is the virtual machines backup, right, which is running on the Azure environment, right? So the same situation might occur for the on-premises as well, right? You have a servers running on the on-premises environment, and there also somebody might be deleted the servers. Somebody, so servers might be compromised with ransomware attack. So you also need a solution for it, right? With the Azure Backup Solution, you can also back up the on-premises servers as well. The server may be running on the VMware environment or Hyper-V environment, or maybe a physical server too, right? So those servers data also can be backed up to the Azure, Azure Backup Solution, and whenever you want to recover it, you can also recover it. So that those solutions also you know available with the Azure Backup Solution. So Azure virtual machines, on-premise virtual machine, you can use one solution to backup. That's the Azure Backup Solution, right? So along with this virtual machine backup, right? In case if you have a SQL server, and SQL server might have a databases, if you want to back up those databases, even that is also available with the Azure Backup Solution. You can back up your SQL databases to the Azure Backup and recover it whenever there is a requirement. Okay, so that is possible with the Azure Backup Solution as well. So other solutions are like, you have a storage account. Okay, in Azure storage account, in the Azure storage account, you have Azure file shares, right? And if you want to back up those file share also, it's possible. So likewise, you have a SAP HANA workload backup, the other workload types also available. It's all depends on your requirement, right? You want to back up the entire server, or you want to back up a specific files and folders. That is also possible with the Azure Backup Solutions. Okay, so now you understood the problem statement, you know the solution. Now we are going to learn how to configure them. Okay, so before we learn configuring, first we have to create the virtual machine or set up the infrastructure. So in our lab, what we will do is we'll try to create virtual machines. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what are the specifications. Okay, so you have a Azure subscription, right? This is your Azure subscription. And within the Azure subscription, first thing what you need to do is you have to create a virtual network. And I will say, let's do this way. Let's create a resource group first. This is your going to be your resource group. And within the resource group, you are going to create a VNet, and it will have multiple subnets. Each subnet will have multiple virtual machines. Okay, this is what you are going to define, or the environment you are going to set up. Okay, once you set up this environment, you have to create a recovery service vault. Let us say, let's put the values here, subscription, and this is the East to West resource group, and this is going to be East to West net. And let's say this could be your web subnet, and this could be your web subnet, and this could be your DB subnet. And obviously these are the web servers and these are the database servers. Okay, so which means this is in a east to west location. Now what you need to do is you have to create a recovery service vault, and we are going to say EUS. Okay, so this recovery service vault will be in a resource group. Okay, so the resource group, and it is part of a location as well, right? So this is, let's say, this should be also in the east to west resource location. Example. Okay, this is in the east to west location, and this is going to be a recovery service vault. So one thing you have to remember is when you're configuring backup, your recovery service vault location and your virtual machine location should be the same. That's the first condition. And your virtual machine should be uh, shouldn't be backup with any other recovery service vault. Okay, if it is already backup with the other recovery service vault, you cannot add this one to the another recovery service vault, which means one VM can be part of one recovery service vault at a time. The steps what we do is, in the Azure recovery service vault, you will have a Azure backup the Azure VMs. That's the first thing. And when you are trying to backup, it will try to discover, it will perform the discovery operation. So it will try to discover the machines which are in the same location as your recovery service vault. Okay, so once it is identified, discover the machines, you are going to configure the backup policy. So in the backup policy, yes, definitely you are going to specify the name of the policy. Do you want to back up the daily or weekly? This is the first condition. How you want to back up your data? Do you want to back up daily or weekly? So whether it's a daily or weekly, if it is a daily, so you're going to specify every day and what time it is. Okay, let's say usually backups, we trigger after the business hours, non-business hours. Let's say after 7 p.m., let's say 11 p.m. Let's say in this example I'm saying EST. Okay, every day after 11 p.m. EST, I'm going to trigger the daily backup. If it is a weekly backup, we are going to specify every week, um, Sunday or Monday, you're going to specify the days. On these days, trigger the backup at 11 p.m. EST. So if it is a weekly backup, right? So we mostly go with the daily backup. So whatever the data backup that is happening, let's say day backup, every day the data is backing up. This backup has to be retained for, let's say, 30 days. Okay. So the data will be stored in the backend for 30 days. So you can also specify the weekly retention. This is a daily retention, right? Daily backup that is happening, that can be retained for 30 days. If it is a weekly backup, weekly retention, you can specify every week, the backup that is happening on Sunday, I want it to be retained for 4 weeks. Example, right? You can specify these retentions. You also have a monthly retention. So though the backup is happening every day, but in a month, okay, in a month, okay, first week, okay, and first Sunday. Okay, so whatever the backup is happening, I want this to be available, a specific day backup in a month or in a week, right? I want this to be available for, let's say, 12 months, or let's say 10 months, as an example. You're going to specify it. In case you want to configure the retention for yearly, every year, okay, every year, in the month of January, okay, whatever the backup is happening, I want this backup to be written for, let's say, 99 years. That's a maximum retention you can have. It's usually specified 10 years and no 5 years or 2 years or 3 years, but this is the maximum. I'm just putting 19 years is the maximum that Microsoft support. All right, so this is what you're going to specify. You're going to specify the backup, how backup has to happen, daily or weekly, and if it is daily, what time it has to happen, and daily backup, how long it has to be retained, weekly backup, how long it has to be retained. Same thing with the monthly and yearly. And these are the optional, the weekly and monthly retention specifications are not the one which I'm defining. It's an optional thing, it's not mandatory, but daily backup retention has to be specified, 30 days or whatever it is. What we generally do in the at real time, right? Or what we generally recommend is, for the production you can specify, let's say, 30 days. Okay, for production workloads you are going to specify 30 days, and non-production you can specify 7 days or 15 days. Even production also can go up to 60 days or 90 days, 120 days, 365 days also. Okay, it's up to us. But but you it's up to, it's if you are ready to, if the data is critical, you might increase the retention days. Okay, if the data is not that critical, 30 days is fine for us, then you define this production as 30 days and non-production as 7 days. So the question you might have it, right? How do I define production servers and non-production servers? Can I define this retention 30 days and 7 days retention? Is it available? No. You can only specify one retention, either 30 days or 7 days or whatever it is, right? Which means you have to create a separate policies. Okay, one policy for the production, one policy for the non-production. In case non-production can be called as development or testing or QA, whatever it is, right? In generic, we are going to specify non-production just to generalize it. It's a non-production. Non-production, I'm going to say 7 days, and production, it's going to be 30 days. So when do you specify? So when you discover the virtual machine, you will see your production missions, prod VM1, prod VM2, and let's say dev VM1 and test VM1 example, right? So when you are configuring backup, you have to say, if you select the production servers, add this production server to the production backup, and add this dev test servers to the non-production backup policy, so that the backup will be triggered automatically based on the policy for this non-production servers, and the retention will be automatically configured for them. All right, so this is how we define it. So the question here is another thing, right? How you configure the backup? Okay, now we learned this infrastructure. Okay, this is the existing infrastructure. We learned what are the mandated things. You configure policy, then you enable backup. Okay, when you enable backup, the VMs will be added to the backup job, backup vault, and the backup jobs will be triggered based on the backup policy, the timings, and it goes on, right? These policies, the configuration, right? Configuring VMs backup can be done in many ways. One is the manual. That is what you are going to learn in the labs. All right. You can also learn how to configure the backup through an automated way. Okay. Automated way. So most of the companies are going to follow this approach, because just imagine, I just gave an example of 2500 servers. right? 2500 servers already existing environment. Your environment might keep on grows. Maybe you might have to build 10 servers, for a new project, maybe 5 servers for a new application, a new customer, right? 5 servers you have to configure the backup manually. Like you get many more servers requests and you have to configure backup manually. It's little difficult. So most of the companies are going for an automation process here. The automation can be done through PowerShell. You can configure backup through PowerShell, and you can also configure backup through Terraform or ARM templates. Okay, so there are other tools as well which you can follow, but these are the most common tools. Terraform and ARM templates are most commonly used. PowerShell has, we used to use the PowerShell, let's say approximately 2 to 3 years ago. 2 years ago, I would say most commonly used tool to configure the backups, or create virtual machines, use CLI, those things. But now when ARM templates and Terraform is being introduced, right? So PowerShell is not being used much. Okay, the PowerShell is being used much for deploying these templates, ARM templates or Terraform templates, but not to create the virtual machines. Okay, so what we do in the ARM templates or Terraform templates, we are going to specify your VM name, VM configurations, like what is the VM size, location, and VNet and everything. Then we are going to also specify, as soon as the VM is created, add the VM to the backup. Okay, so in the backup, based on the VM naming standards, or probably based on the VM tags, as the tags that you're going to assign, maybe the category of your virtual machine. If it's a production virtual machine, go ahead and add the VM to the production policy, or prod policy. If it's a non-production, you are going to specify, okay, go ahead and add it to the non-prod policy. So you are going to specify the condition. The condition say, okay, this VM is belongs to the prod category, this VM is belongs to the non-prod category. So how we define those categories is all, everything will be in automation, and the template you're going to define, um, you know it could be through naming standard, it could be naming standard of the VM, it could be through the tags, it could be through some other values that you are going to define. Based on that, the template will choose or consider this a production server, this a non-production server. Accordingly, the VMs will be added to the right backup policy. Okay, this will be automated. So if it is not automated, that is when you as an Azure administrator will start configuring them manually. Okay, configuring the backup manually. That's the first thing that you do as an Azure administrator. Once a backup is configured, the backup jobs triggers and it goes on. In case if there is a failure, backup job failure, that is where you are going to start troubleshooting the failures. How you troubleshoot it? We'll talk about it. But the first and foremost thing that you need to know, how do you know there is a backup failure, right? What kind of tools you have it, right? So those kind of tools, right, we will be learning now, right? So what we do is we have tools. Let's say in each recovery service vault, you have something called diagnostic setting. Okay, the diagnostic settings have an option to stream your backup jobs information. Okay, send the backup jobs logs, backup jobs to a log analytics workspace, or to a event hub, right, or to a storage account. So which means these backup jobs will be stored in a specific location. It's a storage medium in simple words, I would say. Log Analytics Workspace is a storage that is that that stores the logs of a different services. One of the services is the Azure Backup Service, right? Azure Backup Service jobs logs will be stored in the Log Analytics Workspace. Later, you are going to consume those logs or logs from the Log Analytics workspace and create a email alerts so that you will get to know there's a backup failure. Probably you can also create some dashboards so that your team, like you have a monitoring team, they just look at the dashboard and say, okay, there's a backup job failed, go ahead and troubleshoot it, right? Otherwise, you can also, create a ticket when there is a backup job failed. So that is also possible. This is like, you can use this data, whatever the data that is running inside the logon, that is storing in inside the logon space, you can use this data to, in a different ways. It's not only sending an email, it's not only just creating a dashboard, it's not only just creating a triggering a ticket, right? You can also automate some resolutions, like if the backup job is failed with the, let's say, service is down, right? You can trigger a automation run book, and the automation run book will have the script to start the service. Probably you can use a logic app to perform some other tasks. You have many things that you can do when there is a backup job failed. So that is what you do, because just think 2500 servers you have in one region, and 2500 servers may not be part of one recovery service vault. You might have to create multiple recovery service vault, and you have to split those servers. Let's say you have, let's say, around 50 recovery service vault, and each recovery service vault might have, let's say, 50 to 10 or 50 or 100 virtual machines added. Maybe it depends on the customer, depends on the applications. You are going to create a recovery service vault, and all VMs belongs to a specific application will be part of one recovery service vault. You're going to do it. And as a Azure admin, you cannot go to each and every recovery service vault and go to the backup jobs and start looking at them, right? We need some kind of automated way to monitor this backup jobs, and we need some kind of automation to automatically fix these problems. So that's where these diagnostic settings, looking at the log analytics workspace, or streaming these logs to other monitoring solutions like Splunk or ITSM tools through Event Hub. So those are possible, right? So this is how you monitor the failures, okay, the backup jobs failures. Then you will start troubleshooting it. We'll talk about the troubleshooting in the next session, how, what kind of issues you face it, how do you troubleshoot, and all. We'll look into it, right? And we'll also try to implement this, log analytics workspace and automated email alerts kind of things in the next session. Okay. So and what is next? Okay, so one thing is configuring backup. That could be mostly automated. If it is not automated, uh, you are going to you know configure them. And as and when the backup jobs are happening, you need to monitor. The monitoring also can be automated through this log analytics or space, or event hub or logic apps. Okay, so that is being taken care now. What kind of requests you get it? Apart from the failures, you will get a request to recover the data. So when do you get a recover data for the recovery? So when there's a disaster happened here, right? So any one of these situations, or there could be other situations where somebody will request to recover from the backup. So that's when you get a ticket or email, or somebody ping you in the Teams or any other medium. Then you will start looking at the server and check, okay, how many backups we have, how many recovery points we have, when was the last backup. Those things you will review it, and you will work with the customer end user to recover the data. So you definitely have some procedures to follow. You can't just simply go ahead and restore it. You might have to follow the ATSM process. Probably you might have to ask, why do you need a recovery of the data? And you might have to get a change ticket, change request, get approval from your manager, the change leads, kind of, various things. Because when you recover the data, you are making some changes in your application, or, you're making the change in your operating system. You're going to the previous state, right? So that is a change that you're making that has to be tracked. That is the reason the change management process has been implemented, and you have to follow that. Okay, so that's the process you follow for recovering. So that is what you see, as an Azure administrator. These are the areas you configure backup, you monitor the backup, you fix the backup issues, and you perform the restore. These are the 4 steps that you perform as an Azure administrator. So where you need more skills and more understanding about this product, configuring backup may not need great understanding. So, but troubleshooting the backup issues you might need to understand. So, which means what happens when you add the machine. So what stages you will see the failure is while configuring the backup for your virtual machine. While you're adding this machine to the recovery service vault, you might see problem. And the problem will be very least out of 100%, like 1 to 10, or let's say 5%. You will see issues like you cannot add your VM to the backup vault. Okay, that's one of the scenario. Once a backup VM is added to the backup job is failed because of various reasons. So if you want to fix those problems, first you need to understand what happens when the backup job is triggered. What are the different stages it goes through? What kind of operations it happens in the OS level, right? If you know them, if you know them very well, and it's easy to fix those problems as well, right? So we'll also learn about the workflow. What happens if I add the VM to the backup world? What happens when the backup job is triggered? Okay, what logs you have to review so that you can fix if there are any problems. Okay, and I will show you what are the known issues and how do you fix them in the next session. So you'll get more clarity on the end-to-end process. The one which I'm talking only for the VM backup, we will also implement or configure the database backups and files and folders backups and file share backup. So these are the other scenarios that you will be learning in the upcoming sessions. And and when it comes to the enterprise, what kind of workload you usually or mostly manages? Virtual machine backup and database backups. Okay, these are the two things that are major. Very rare scenarios you are seeing. I mean, maybe the customers are not yet utilize it. Probably in the next 1 year or 2 years, they might be utilizing it more, which is like Azure File Storage Service and on-premises files and folders backups. Okay, these are the workload they're trying to back up in the like very less at the moment, but in future they might be adding more as well. Okay, so but majority of this backup workloads will be on Azure virtual machines and Azure SQL database backups. All right, so that's about it for today's discussion, I would say. In case if you have any questions, you can ask me now. You can unmute yourself and ask the questions. In case if anybody watching in the YouTube, then they can put the questions in the comment or reach out to me directly. So guys, whoever is in the call, probably you can try to unmute and ask the questions. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, in some companies, they will be using any different vendor backup. No, is it applicable in this scenario, like a Beam backup and all?
They will be using it. So the solution what we discussed is Azure Native Service Backup, right? Native solution, and whatever the workflow I just explained, it's for the native service backup only. If they are using Veeam backup or maybe let's say Commvault backup, they have to go with a different process, right? They have to set up the tool in a server and they have to look at the high availability for that backup solution. So that's a different setup together. Okay, but in general, if you are going to use the Azure native backup solution, this is a process you're going to follow. And got it?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Even there also, right? Even if you're using Commvault backup, even adding the servers to the Commvault backup can also be automated using the PowerShell script. I don't think it is possible through ARN template, because ARN template is only mostly work for the Azure native services. It doesn't work for the third party. Okay, so you can use the PowerShell, as soon as the VM build, you can use the PowerShell tool to install the, let's say backup agent inside the machine. The agent can automatically register to the backup media agent server. They're like all things can be automated through PowerShell, but ARN templates Terraform can only be used to automate your Azure native services configurations, because they have the APIs that can talk through this automation tools. Clear? Any other questions?
Kamal, I have small doubt.
Yeah, go ahead.
In case, for example, user requested to we are not using the servers, you can remove the servers like that. After some days, user requesting again, can you restore the server? In that time, we have possibility to restore.
So what we do is, when that's a decommission process, right? So
Yes, that is
decommission,
data.
yeah, decom process. So decommission, it comes to the decommission. What we do is, in
Hmm.
Azure Recovery Service Vault, you have two options. Okay, remove the VM from the backup. Okay, remove the VM from the backup, which means it will just remove the VM from the backup service, but still the data can be available in the recovery service vault. Okay, so the other option is remove the VM and delete the backup data, which means it remove the VM from the recovery service vault and data also will be removed. So as per the best practices, we see such use cases as well, right? Most of the, it's a common use case, be it on-prem or in Azure or any other cloud provider, right? It's common that you decommission the server. Maybe later, customer might say, hey, I want to spin up this machine with the same data that we had earlier. So what we do with the just remove option by keeping the data available, right? If the data retention is, let's say, 30 days, right? So
Yeah.
the data will be there for 30 days, though you decommission the virtual machine. In case in future, if the customer want the data back or create a VM again, they can recover from this within this 30 days of period. Okay, that's all. That's another option you have. And Microsoft recently introduced, not recently, it's been a couple of months, I would say year as well. They introduced this soft delete feature in the recovery service vault. In case if one of the Azure admin accidentally delete the backup or disable the backup, right? They disable the backup from Azure Recovery Service Vault. So even though they said delete the backup data as well, remove the VM and delete the backup data. So as per the decommission process, you got a new engineer, he just got a KT and he got access. Instead of removing the just VM, he might have say remove the VM and delete the backup data as well, right? So even though he performed that, so the because of the soft delete will keep the data for 14 days. Okay. In case if somebody realize, identify, okay, we are not supposed to delete the backup data. So what they can do is they can perform the undelete operation, which means whatever the data delete operation that they perform, it will be undo, and the backup items will be there in the Azure backup service, recovery service vault. Then just say remove the VM by keeping the data available. So that is the soft delete feature. By default, they're enabling it for all recovery service vault to save the customers from these accidental deletions. Clear?
Yeah, yes, come on, thank you.
All right. Any other questions from anybody? All right, everybody. If no question, then let's catch up tomorrow. And in the tomorrow session, we will try to configure the VM backup and go through all this end-to-end process that I just spoke about it. Once it is completed, we'll also try to implement the other backup scenarios as well. Once the backup solution, scenarios are completed, we'll go with the disaster recovery solution scenarios, which is ASR. So we'll again talk about what situations lead to a disaster in your IT infrastructure, and how you can ensure that your workloads are highly available during such disasters. Okay, and then we will learn how to configure it, and how to monitor it, and how to troubleshoot it, right? And you will define what will be your roles and responsibilities on that service. Okay, what things we can automate, what things we cannot automate, also we'll learn from them. Okay, all right, everybody, thank you so much for your time, and let's connect tomorrow.